When the river exploded its banks and the town went dark, the soldier heard a girl's whisper through the storm, "Stay with me." With his German shepherd bracing against the torrent, he stepped into black water that wanted everything: her breath, his courage, and the last light in the valley. The rain didn't fall, it hammered. It came down as if the night itself had opened its ribs and poured out everything it had hoarded for years. Gutters surrendered first, then the culverts, then the street grates choking on leaves and plastic and twigs. The river swelled like a long that wouldn't exhale. People said they'd seen storms like this before, but they said it from warm living rooms with the TV on and the walls around them steady and unmoving. Tonight, those walls shivered. Tonight, the rooms felt smaller. Tonight, the power blinked and died, and the town finally understood it wasn't the storm they were in, it was the flood. Evan Cole shrugged into his dark, rubberized jacket and cinched the hood tight. The material was already slick with a shine that beaded, gathered, and then ran off in quick, silver lines. He slid a hand along the thick collar at his left thigh and Rex pressed into him, steady, solid. The dog's ears were up, head tilted slightly, reading the world the way only a dog can, by currents and scents and subsonic tremors that people miss. "Stay close," Evan said, though he didn't need to. Rex never strayed more than a tether length away, even without a tether. The volunteer staging point was nothing more than a repurposed maintenance garage near the river's bend: concrete floor, rolling steel doors, shelves of sandbags, coils of rope, and a smell of oil and wet wood. A portable floodlight threw a harsh cone onto a folding table where a topo map glistened under droplets and flashlight arcs. Someone had scrawled circles in red grease pencil. The circles were already out of date. "Cole," a deputy shouted over the roar of rain on metal, "the southern cul-de-sac, Birch Hollow, calls coming in from 3 addresses. One's a non-responsive line, one's panicked, one's a kid. Dispatch caught something before the line died, upstairs, can't swim." "Copy," Evan said, his voice instinctively clipped, the old rhythms finding him. He'd carried that voice through dust storms on another continent, the one where he learned how fast minutes can drain out of a body. He slung a rescue pack, tourniquet pouch, trauma shears, pressure dressings, glow sticks, thermal blanket, carabiners. He checked the throw bag in a coil of webbing. He tightened the headlamp until it pressed a small, reassuring ache into his brow. He tested the radio, then secured it high in his chest rig. Rex nudged his hip. The dog exhaled once, short, a wordless "I'm ready." They hit the street together, Evan moving with shuffling steps that learned the water's temperament by feel. It was ankle-deep outside the garage, fast and hungry, tugging at boot soles. He smelled creosote, mud, and the faint electric bite that said somewhere a transformer had died too dramatically. The town's darkness was not complete. It was broken into shards by battery lanterns, phone screens, and the few porch lights that clung to life like stubborn fireflies. The first corner told them the truth: the river had come to visit. It didn't fit the postcard image anymore, didn't stay in its polite banks between cottonwoods. It had poured itself into the grid of streets and sidewalks, taking the shortest path through people's lives. Evan angled toward Birch Hollow, knowing the layout from summer jogs and winter dog walks: 10 ranch houses tucked into a cul-de-sac that sloped just enough to feel safe on dry days. Tonight the slope was a ramp for water. He toggled the radio. "Unit Cole en route to Birch Hollow. Water level rising. Possible pediatric in distress." "Copy, Cole," the dispatcher said. "Last ping from 118 Birch. Caller ID registered to a Bennett household. We lost the call mid-sentence. Do we have a name on the child?" "Negative. Parent said she's upstairs right before we dropped." Rex pulled fractionally ahead, nose working, then checked himself and fell back to Evan's shin. The rain had flattened the air into a uniform wet smell, but Rex still parsed it, slicing it into layers: river, engine exhaust, soil torn up from lawns, the rich, iron edge of a broken pipe, and something that was not a scent but a signature: fear. Human fear came out through skin and breath in volatile notes, and Rex had cataloged thousands of them during drills, searches, and that one warehouse fire when smoke made the world into a chalkboard of erased lines. A sedan floated at the intersection like a heavy leaf, bumper knocking softly against a stop sign. Evan skirted it, wading thigh-deep now, using a mailbox post as a gauge, only the top third visible. He marked that in his head. "Rex," he said, "with me," and the dog placed himself in the V of Evan's body, shoulders angled to the current, strong legs scribing patient arcs against the push. Birch Hollow appeared as a scatter of rooflines and trees whose lower halves had been erased by black water. A porch light near the entrance flickered and died as Evan watched, the bulb going dim like a closing eye. He scanned windows with his headlamp, sweeping for movement, reflection, the staccato Morse code of someone's survival instinct. "Hello," he called, training making his voice carry from diaphragm to storm. "Rescue team. Call out. Knock on glass. Flash a light." Nothing answered but rain and water slapping against vinyl siding. He pushed deeper. The current found his thighs and gripped them with the blind conviction of a crowd. He sidestepped in a defensive fairy angle the way river guides taught, let the water have its way with your outline but not with your direction. Rex leaned harder, shoulder to shin, reading the angle and adjusting, a second brain calculating friction and force. A sound rolled across the cul-de-sac then, the hollow, sick knock of something heavy hitting something hollow. A trash bin? A door? Evan swung the headlamp and caught the flash of a house number, 114, then 116, then, a little farther, the brass 118 peeled and gleaming under water gloss. The front steps of 118 were already a memory. The porch rail looked like a ship's rail, waves breaking against spindles. A child's bicycle had been tethered to it by a pink ribbon, the bike now floating like a tired fish at the end of a string. The ribbon snapped as he watched and the bicycle spun away, downstream, swallowed by large, anonymous dark. "Dispatch, I've got 118 visual. Waterline midpoint on the front windows. No visible movement." He paused, listening, not with his ears alone but with the rooted quiet that had kept men alive in places where footsteps meant everything. And then he heard it. It didn't cut through the storm, it threaded it. A filament of a voice, so low it almost wasn't a voice, more breath than sound, more syllable than sentence. "Stay." He stopped moving. "Say again," he shouted without shouting. "Call out. Where are you?" The voice came again, from somewhere above and slightly right, thinned by glass and rain. "With me." Rex's head snapped up. He fixed on the rightward angle and gave a soft, urgent whine, confirmation. Evan tilted the beam up. The second-story window above the garage wore a frost of rain. Behind it, pressed to the pane like the last petal on a storm-torn flower, a small hand. And there, 2 inches to the left, a pale shape, a cheek and one eye, black pupil huge in a room that had lost its light. "I see you." Evan shouted, the words solid, anchoring. "I'm Evan. This is Rex. We're coming to you. I need you to step back from the window if you can, okay? We're going to get inside." The hand fluttered, a hummingbird move, then flattened again. The outline didn't retreat. The child's world had shrunk to the diameter of that fear. He scanned the house. The garage was a dark mouth, water chewing at its lower lip. The front door was out of the question, too deep, too direct to the current. The left side yard had a wooden privacy fence, now a raft being pressed by the river. The right side offered a narrow channel between 118 and 120 where the current looked slightly lazier. He traced the eaves, found the downspout near the corner, and then, like a done deal, he saw it, a trellis of old vine, wisteria or grape, bolted to the siding under the very window where the child's hand shone. The lattice looked old, but not ornamental, it had borne weight once. It might bear it again. He took in a breath that tasted like coins. Okay, boy, he told Rex. Plan is right side, trellis ascent, window entry. We anchor first. He swung the rescue pack around, clipped a carabiner to the gutter support, load-tested it with his body weight. The metal groaned but held. He paid out webbing, looped a figure 8 on a bite, then clipped Rex's harness to a short safety. The dog leaned forward, testing, trusting. Dispatch, he said, I have contact with a child at 118, second story over garage. Attempting elevated entry. Mark me on rope. Copy, Cole. Backup diverted, ETA unknown due to road washouts. Use caution. Always do. Evan started for the right side channel, keeping his torso angled, planting each step like a claim. The rain thickened as if to erase him. He let it try. He'd been erased before and learned how to right himself back. Rex matched his pace, each muscle a line drawn with patience. They reached the corner, and the trellis loomed up out of the dark like a ladder someone had woven from a dead summer. Evan put a gloved palm against it. It flexed, creaked, but didn't tear free. He leaned closer and spoke to the wood without words, the way carpenters do, asking if it could hold a man who refused to let go. Behind the glass above, the small hand was still there. The storm hissed like a crowd with 1,000 mouths. And somewhere inside it, that thin, breath-made thread of a voice said again, not louder but clearer, as if the night itself had decided to carry it, stay, with me. Evan looked at Rex. The dog's eyes caught the headlamp's spill and returned a steady amber that said what words would cheapen, I'm here. Okay, Evan told the flood, the house, the voice, and his own bones. We're staying. He set his boot on the lowest slat of the trellis and felt it bite back. The trellis shivered like an old man's breath when Evan tested the second rung. Wood fibers complained under his weight, tiny, high-pitched sounds barely audible beneath the rain's endless drumming. He shifted his center of gravity, making himself narrower, lighter in the way climbers learn to become an idea rather than a mass. His boots found the next slat. He kept 3 points of contact, gloved fingers curled around the vine-thickened lattice as if he were palming a spine. Rex, hold, he said, and the dog set a low, braced stance, harness snug, the short safety line a taut, humming line between them and the storm. Rex's paws splayed just enough to find purchase on the submerged sod. The dog's chest rose and fell slow, deliberate, as if he'd matched his breathing to Evan's heartbeat. Evan moved. Wrong by wrong. The trellis answered in a language of groans and old nails adjusting to new truths. At the window, the little hand vanished for a heartbeat, then flashed again as though the child had mustered the courage to shift. He wanted to tell her that was good, movement meant fight, and fight meant time, but the rain ate gentle words and returned only commands. He reached the sill height, boots scraping wet siding. The window glass had turned itself into a mirror, bouncing his headlamp back into his eyes, so he angled the beam away and leaned into the framed darkness. Through the reflection he made out shapes, a slanted ceiling, a dresser half emptied, a paper lantern trembling from a draft, a bed pulled away from the wall. On the bed, a slight form cocooned in a blanket, knees drawn up. The pale cheek he'd seen outside was a small oval in a dimming world. Hey, he said, voice steady, scaled down to the intimacy two people share through glass. I'm Evan. I'm going to open this window, okay? I need you to scoot back a tiny bit so I don't bump you. Can you do that? The girl nodded, one tiny, bird-like dip, and then, as if remembering the words she'd used to summon him through all that water, she whispered, stay with me. I'm here, he said, and let the certainty ride his bones into the trellis. I'm staying. He checked the sash. Painted shut in places, swollen by humidity and terror. He wedged his rescue knife under the lower rail and gently pried, working the blade along the seam. The wood protested, then relented with a small cracking sigh, as if exhaling the season's last stubbornness. He slid the knife to the latch, flipped it. The window rose 3 inches, then stuck. He leaned his shoulder into it, the trellis flexing under him. Easy, he told the house, the way one speaks to a spooked horse. The sash climbed another inch. A lightning stroke spidered across the sky behind him, a white blueprint of chaos. The thunder hit with a physical shove. The trellis lurched. Evan absorbed the move with knees and elbows and old training. Almost there, he said to the girl, to himself, to the storm. He rocked the window. It gave. 6 inches. 8. Enough to pass a child through, but not him. Okay, he said, voice low. What's your name? She swallowed. Maya. Hi, Maya. That's beautiful. My partner down there is Rex. He's a very good dog. He's going to come up after me or wait for us, he'll decide the safest thing. He shifted his angle. Is anyone else in the house with you? Maya's eyes went to the bedroom door, then back to him. My mom went to get Nana. The road, she stopped. The look on her face finished it, the road had turned into a river. Her mom had tried to outrun it and been pinned by the world instead. How long ago? Maya glanced at the glowless digital clock on the dresser, a habit of looking for time in a place that had none. A little bit, she said, because children live in feelings, not minutes. Okay. He needed to consider 2 timelines now, the water rising inside and the unknown vectored path of a mother into the dark. First, secure the living breathing child he could see. Then widen the circle. He pocketed the knife and reached into the window gap with his free hand, felt for the lock of a second sash. Nothing. Good, single hung. He slid his fingers to the bottom edge of the glass, lifted with forearms and lats. The trellis creaked like a tree deciding. Maya, I'm going to pass you a strap. I want you to loop it around your chest like a seat belt, over one shoulder, under the other, and clip the shiny part together. Can you do that? Her gaze skittered to the window, to him, to the red carabiner he waggled. I think so. That's my girl, he said softly. He fed the webbing through the gap until the carabiner clinked on the sill. Her fingers were small, damp with sweat, and brave. She fumbled once, twice, then found the path. The click of metal was a cathedral bell in miniature. Perfect. Scoot to me. Belly on the bed. I'm going to help you up. We'll do it slow. He wedged his forearm through the opening as a brace, then slid his other hand inside to find her under the arms, careful to keep his grip broad so he wasn't a force but a platform. Deep breath, he said, and felt her ribs expand against his wrist. 1, 2, lift. She rose with a small grunt, the blanket shedding like old skin. Her heart hammered under his palm, a fast bird trying to remember how to land. The window frame scraped her pajama top. She squeaked, not pain, exactly, but the shock of cold wet air kissing warm skin. He eased her over the sill and into his chest space on the trellis. The lattice bowed. He became stillness so the structure could remember strength. Wrap your arms around my neck, he told her, but don't choke me or I'll sing very badly. It was a ridiculous thing to say in a flood, and that was precisely why he said it. Her mouth twitched in a small, unwilling smile. She locked her arms. Her cheek pressed against his jaw, warm and real. You smell like rain, she whispered, as if rain were a person he'd brought with him. Below, Rex shifted, eyes never leaving them, reading the angles, the load, the possibility of fall. The short safety line thrummed, his only tether to Evan, and the dog leaned back half an inch to absorb a potential drop that never came. Okay, Evan breathed. Now the dog. He scanned the siding, the trellis's bolt points, the gutter bracket he'd used earlier. He needed Maya at ground level before Rex climbed, but if he descended with her and lost footing in the faster channel near the corner, the dog's line could become an entanglement hazard. He looked left. A narrow roof lip extended over the right side window. Below it the water eddied slightly, making a pocket of quieter current. He could descend there, pass Maya to the roof lip for a moment's belly crawl hold, then complete the downclimb and receive her into the water with Rex creating a living brace. Maya, I'm going to move us onto that little ledge, okay? It's like a balcony but flatter and much less safe, so we go slow when we listen. Her nod was microscopic but deliberate. He lowered his weight, feeling the trellis tell him where to put pressure and where to pretend he was missed. His boot found a cross slat, he made himself become a hinge. He slid sideways, body between Maya and the fall. Lightning again, farther, the thunder a growl this time rather than a slap. The pause between flash and voice told him the cell was moving. Good, bad, neither, it meant new variables. The roof lip shone with a skim of water. He laid his forearm along it, palm down, creating friction. On 3, belly out. 1, 2, good. She spread herself like a starfish, fingers whitening as they gripped the drip edge. He kept one hand on the strap at her back, the carabiner a little red heart beating under his knuckles. Rex, he called, up. It was a voice he used once a year at most, the climb command, and the dog answered with trust. Rex tested the trellis with a paw, then another, moving in diagonals, finding the places Evan had warmed with his own weight. The harness rasped against wet wood. The dog's breath puffed into the rain like tiny steam ghosts. Easy, Evan told them both. The trellis bent another degree, held. Rex's nails found the sill, and the dog lifted his chest to the roof lip next to Maya, a second anchor in a world of water. Okay, Evan said, and he meant the word to go all the way through all 3 of them. Now we descend. Maya, hold on to my neck again. Rex, heel behind me when we're on the ground. We're going to a safer spot. Safer than this, she whispered, almost incredulous, because children don't always believe safer exists when the world forgets how to be a room. Safer than this, he promised, and built a space in his voice where safety could live. He reversed his climb, shoulder and hip and knee and boot placing themselves in a choreography of muscle memory and prayer. The window became above, then behind, then nothing. The rain turned into a wall again. At 6 feet above the surface he paused and looked into the water as if it were a face he needed to read. The current pulled left. Debris whisked by, a fence picket, a plastic cooler, a teddy bear with one arm raised. He chose his landing zone, the pocket he'd seen earlier, a small lean-to of quiet beside the right wall. Coming down, he said to no one and everyone, and stepped the last foot, boots entering water with that heavy surge that always tries to take the legs. He opened his stance, leaned into it, became a wedge. Maya clung, her breath small and fast on his throat. Rex dropped lightly beside them, splashing, his weight instantly a counterforce, his body angling upstream to become a boulder with eyes. Evan adjusted the strap, bringing Maya to his chest like a carried pack, her face tucked against his collar. I've got you, he said into her hair. You're doing perfect. A low bang vibrated the siding to his left. He turned his head. The garage door, below their window, was buckling inward and out in jerks, the flood testing it like a boxer does a heavy bag. If it blew, the surge would punch through the house and re-enter the street as a new river mouth, changing every map in a blink. We move now, he said. He looked to the narrow channel toward the cul-de-sac entrance. Too fast. He looked to the yard between 118 and 120, where hedges under the water made a rumpled darkness, the tops might give footing and snag legs in the same breath. Directly ahead, the side yard gate was a rectangle of turbulence. But beyond the gate, he glimpsed what mattered, the mass of a delivery truck stalled diagonally, forming a breakwater. Downstream of that steel bulk, the current lapsed into a manageable slosh. Aim for the truck, he told Rex. The dog leaned his shoulder into Evan's thigh, a yes you could feel. He stepped. The water tested, failed, tried again. He planted the ferried angle, felt the pull, allowed the slide that carried him toward his chosen line. Rex matched precisely, head just above the surface, ears slicked by rain, eyes bright and calm. Maya's whisper returned to the place where fear meets wanting. "Stay with me," she murmured, not as a plea now but as a thread binding them. "We're all staying," Evan said, and pushed into the river that wanted to write their names in a different book. The delivery truck loomed like a stranded ship, its faded company logo half-submerged, headlights long dead. Water slapped its metal sides, spraying arcs that caught Evan's headlamp like splinters of glass. He moved toward it, each step calculated, shoulders square against the current. Maya's arms clung tighter, her little fingers digging into his jacket, not from fear alone but from the primal instinct not to let go of the one anchor she had left. "Good hold, Maya," Evan said, his tone the calm rhythm of a metronome, steadying them both. "I need you to keep breathing with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Match me." He exaggerated his breaths, long, steady pulls, slow exhales, and felt her chest begin to sink with his. Rex advanced half a pace ahead, chest deep now, his harness line taut with each push. He wasn't just a dog, he was ballast, compass, and shield. Each time the current surged, he angled his body, absorbing force so Evan and the child could pass in its lee. Rainwater sheeted off his coat in rivers, but his ears remained trained forward, eyes flicking between the flood and his soldier. They reached the truck's lee, a pocket where the river relented. The sudden stillness felt unnatural, like stepping from a battlefield into a cathedral. Evan leaned against the steel flank, chest heaving, giving his legs a moment to reset. The truck groaned faintly, shifting under invisible weight. If it moved, the pocket would collapse. Time was brittle here. "Rex, hold perimeter," Evan ordered. The shepherd planted, nose twitching, ears swiveling. Evan crouched enough to bring Maya's face into his light. She blinked against the rain, lips bluing. He stripped off his outer glove with his teeth and pressed the back of his hand against her cheek. Cold, but not yet failing. "How you doing, Maya?" he asked. Her voice was thin but stubborn. "Cold. But, okay." "You're stronger than most adults I know," Evan said, meaning every word. "We're moving to higher ground. You see that hill?" He pointed with his chin toward the faint silhouette beyond the cul-de-sac, a rise crowned with dark pines. "That's our goal." She followed his gaze, eyes widening at the distance. "It's far." "Far is fine," Evan replied. "Far means time. And time means hope. We'll take it one step, one breath, one promise at a time. Deal?" She nodded, burying her face again against his collar. The sound hit them before the water did, a low, rolling boom like a drumbeat echoing through earth. Evan froze, muscles tightening. He knew that sound, a structure surrendering upstream. Seconds later, a surge bulged the flood surface, a wall of black carrying debris, sections of fencing, shattered furniture, and what looked like the prow of a dock torn from its moorings. "Brace!" Evan barked. He pivoted, pressing his back to the truck, arms locking Maya to his chest. Rex launched forward, planting himself broadside to the current, growling as if he could intimidate a river. The surge struck. Water leapt chest high, hammering Evan against steel. His teeth clacked. Maya whimpered into his collar. For a moment, the world tilted, river against man, storm against will, and then it passed, rushing downstream, leaving only its memory in bruised muscles and rattling steel. Evan exhaled, a ragged sound, and pressed his forehead to cold metal. "Still here," he murmured, less to reassure them than to confirm to himself. He adjusted his grip on Maya, checked Rex's line, then forced his body upright. "We go." They pushed out of the truck shelter and into the open cul-de-sac again. The waterline had climbed. First-floor windows had become eyes drowning in their own sockets. Shingles tore loose from roofs and sailed like lethal kites. Somewhere, a propane tank banged against stone with hollow menace. Maya stirred. My mom. Evan swallowed, his throat raw. We'll find her. It was not a platitude. It was a mission statement, filed away behind the urgent task of survival. Right now, we keep you safe so you can tell her yourself. Rex suddenly froze, head jerking left. His ears locked onto something beyond sight. A bark ripped from his throat, sharp and urgent. Evan followed his line of sight. Through the sheets of rain, across the cul-de-sac, a faint yellow glimmer blinked in an upper window of house 120. Not electric, too unsteady. Flame. Damn, Evan muttered. Candle or lantern tipped. Fire and flood, the cruel twins. He glanced at Maya. Her eyes had caught the flicker. Fear deepened the hollows beneath them. We can't reach them yet, he said, choosing truth sharpened with steel. But we mark it. Others will come. Our path is the hill. He needed to keep her moving, to preserve her strength, but he etched the coordinates into memory, his soldier's brain refusing to forget those in peril. The side yard gate appeared ahead, its wooden planks shuddering under the push of water. Evan reached it, jammed his shoulder against swollen boards, and shoved. Hinges screamed, then yielded, opening a crack wide enough for a man, a dog, and a small life cradled against his ribs. Beyond the gate, the hill rose like salvation. It was still far, water pooling at its base, but it was land that climbed above the flood's hunger. Trees bent in the storm, their trunks black rivers themselves. Somewhere up there, others might already be gathering, or it might be empty. Either way, it was where they had to go. Almost there, Evan whispered into Maya's hair. Her reply came soft, barely audible, yet it was stronger than thunder. Stay with me. Evan's jaw set. Always. He stepped into the dark yard, Rex flowing beside him, the hill a promise painted against lightning's brief signature. The yard between 118 and 120 was no longer a yard at all, it was a black tidal filled with ghostly shapes of submerged shrubs and the outlines of a swing set that swayed like a skeleton in the flood. Evan waded in, knees driving against the drag, every step a negotiation between muscle and current. The water clawed at him, greedy, always looking for imbalance. Maya clung tight, face buried in his collar, her small body trembling against the thud of his heartbeat. Rex moved like an extension of Evan's will, shoulders rolling in powerful arcs, claws finding tiny holds where human feet slipped. The shepherd didn't look back, he didn't have to. His presence was an unbroken line of trust, a wordless pact in flesh and bone. When Evan slowed to test footing, Rex leaned forward, reading the terrain with every whisker and paw pad, pulling the team's center of gravity just enough to counter the flood. A garden shed, half-dipped from its cinderblock base, loomed ahead. Its roof sagged into the water, shingles peeling like old bark. Evan angled toward it, knowing that even a half-rotten structure could provide a windbreak for a brief pause. He pressed his shoulder to the wall, letting the current flow past his thighs while he scanned the darkness beyond. The hill was still there, its tree-line etched in brief strokes by lightning. But between him and that salvation, the water widened into an open stretch of backyards, no fences, no landmarks, just a broad black sheet rushing with hidden teeth. He toggled his radio. Static answered. The repeaters must have gone down with the power grid. Backup was either delayed or scattered. He was on his own timeline now. Rex, he murmured, center. The dog shifted instantly, placing himself where his weight could steady Evan's frame. Evan adjusted his grip on Maya, sliding one arm under her legs in a firefighter's carry so she could rest more against his chest. Her head lolled slightly, exhaustion creeping in. He needed to keep her conscious. Maya, he said softly, angling his mouth close to her ear, do you know what soldiers do when they're tired? She stirred faintly. What? They make up silly songs so their feet remember to keep moving. "Wanna try?" Her whisper was almost lost to the rain. "Okay." He started with something absurd, a cadence from basic training twisted into nonsense. "I don't know, but I've been told. Rex's paws are made of gold." His voice rolled, steady, absurd against the storm. To his surprise, Maya giggled, a weak but genuine sound. She added, "I don't know, but I've been told. Soldiers don't mind getting cold." "Perfect," he said, smiling into the rain. He felt life spark in her words, a fragile flame against the flood's hunger. Then the sound came, low, metallic, groaning. Evan froze. Ahead, near the open expanse, a utility pole tilted, its base undermined by the current. Power lines dangled, sparking where their insulation had torn. Blue-white arcs crackled over the water like angry serpents. "Damn," Evan hissed. Electricity in floodwater was death on contact. He scanned for alternatives. The sparking zone covered most of the direct path toward the hill. To the left, the yard sloped lower, deeper water, faster current. To the right, he spotted a cluster of trees, their trunks thick, roots half exposed, creating eddies where the water slowed. "Rex, right flank," he ordered. The shepherd turned instantly, guiding them toward the trees. Evan shifted course, muscles straining as he pulled them away from the lethal shimmer of arcs dancing across water. A flash illuminated the scene, lines snapping one by one, some falling directly into the current. The sound was like the world tearing in two. "Stay with me," Maya whimpered. "Always," Evan said, pushing harder, every nerve tuned to survival. They reached the trees. The current broke against the trunks, calmer but swirling. Evan wedged himself into the crook of two roots, chest heaving. The girl clung tighter. Rex pressed against him, both of them shaking off sheets of rain. For a moment, the three of them formed a triangle of defiance. Evan lifted his chin, scanning upward. The tree stretched higher toward the hill, but the ground was uneven, portions collapsing under the assault of water. They couldn't stay here, roots would loosen, and the current would claim everything. He shifted Maya, meeting her wide, glassy eyes. "You see those trees up there? That's where we're going. But I need you to stay awake, keep talking to me. Tell me something about you." She blinked, shivering. I have a rabbit. His name is Clover." "That's a strong name," Evan said. "Does Clover like carrots?" She nodded faintly, eyes focusing, the smallest smile cracking her lips. "And apples." "Then we'll get you home to feed him again," Evan promised, voice iron. Another sound cut through, the rumble of collapsing structure. Evan turned his head in time to see the shed they'd passed give up its fight. The walls caved, the roof sliding into the flood. A wave surged outward, smaller than the earlier surge but still strong enough to shake their foothold. Evan tightened his stance, Rex leaning with him, Maya gasping softly but holding on. The flood wasn't done with them. Not by a long shot. "All right," Evan muttered, squaring his shoulders. "Hill or nothing." He pushed off from the roots, muscles burning, and stepped into the current once more. The lightning stitched the world with fire, thunder shook the ground beneath the water, and the soldier, the child, and the dog moved together toward the promise of higher ground. The grove of trees gave them a moment's illusion of shelter, but Evan knew better than to believe it. Roots snapped under water pressure like bones, and trunks swayed against currents they were never meant to fight. The storm was no longer simply rain and river, it was a force trying to erase the valley, to scrub away memory and replace it with silence. Evan shifted Maya higher in his arms, adjusting the rescue strap so it supported more of her weight. Her wet hair clung to his cheek, strands cold as wires. She was whispering something again, not words this time but the rhythmic sound of counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, each syllable shaky but deliberate. He realized she was matching steps with him, a child's way of joining the march. Good rhythm, he told her, pushing into the current that lapped his thighs. Don't lose it. Rex forged ahead, chest cutting waves, his tail acting like a rudder. His amber eyes reflected the headlamp beam whenever he turned his head back to check them. Evan had seen soldiers lose nerve under fire, but Rex had never once flinched, not in the desert, not in the smoke of burning warehouses, not here where a whole town drowned. The shepherd was more than courage, he was certainty embodied. The trees thinned, opening onto a wider stretch of backyard. A trampoline lay half-submerged, its safety net sagging into the water like a collapsed web. Toys floated, plastic trucks, a headless doll, the pink helmet of a child who was hopefully safe somewhere else tonight. Each object felt like a memory loosed from its moorings, drifting until claimed by the river. Evan moved steadily, eyes scanning for hazards. Fences had become invisible snares, and he knew one wrong step could tangle legs and drag them under. He probed with each boot before committing weight, body angled forward so the flood couldn't steal balance. His thighs burned, his lower back screamed, but he didn't let it show. Evan? Maya's voice was tiny, fragile, but awake. Yeah, kiddo? Why did you come? He tightened his grip, heart pinching. Because you called. And because no one stays alone in a storm. Her face pressed tighter into his jacket. I thought nobody heard me. I did, he said, and his voice was sharp with conviction. And I'm not letting go. The thunder rolled again, closer, shaking droplets from branches above. Lightning flared, outlining the hill like a beacon. It wasn't far now, maybe 100 yards, but in a flood, 100 yards was an ocean. Rex suddenly stopped. His body stiffened, hackles rising. Evan froze. The dog's nose pointed toward the right, where a neighboring house sat half-submerged. Its garage roof barely jutted above the waterline, shingles sliding away with each surge. At first, Evan saw nothing. Then, faintly, he caught movement, a hand, frantic, slapping at the roofline. Someone was on top of the garage, barely clinging, water climbing with every second. Evan's gut twisted. He looked at Maya. She was watching too, eyes wide, lips trembling. Another person, she whispered. Yes, Evan said, jaw tight. The math began instantly in his head. The hill was safety. The hill meant survival for Maya. But that hand was a life measured in minutes, maybe less. His instinct screamed to go, to add that life to their fragile circle. But he weighed risk, the surge, the distance, the exhaustion creeping into Maya's frame. Maya's whisper broke his calculation. We can't leave them. Evan met her eyes. She was right, and she knew it. He'd taught soldiers to live by triage, save who you can, when you can, but sometimes principles outran practicality. Tonight wasn't about numbers. Tonight was about a promise, stay with me. And staying meant not letting the flood decide who mattered. He nodded once. Okay. But you hold tight. This will be rough. He angled toward the garage. Rex lunged forward, eager, sensing decision. The water deepened, chest high now, cold and dragging. Evan lifted Maya higher, resting her against his shoulder like a bundle, one arm wrapped around her back, the other stroking against the current. Every step was war. The hand slapped again, weaker. Evan shouted, hold on. We're coming. A voice cracked back, hoarse and raw. Help. It was a man, mid-30s maybe, soaked and shaking, clinging to the slick shingles. The flood had risen nearly to his chest. Evan reached the garage edge, bracing against the current's torque. Rex, anchor. The shepherd planted his body against a floating timber, pressing it against the wall, giving Evan something solid. Evan shifted, free hand grasping for the man. Take her first. Evan shouted over the storm. Grab her. The man blinked rain from his eyes, stunned. The kid. Take her. Evan barked again, thrusting Maya toward him. She whimpered, but Evan's voice cut through. It's okay. Trust me. Go, Maya. The man caught her under the arms, dragging her onto the sloped roofline, pressing her against the higher ridge where water lapped but hadn't conquered. Evan's heart only eased when she clutched shingles and looked back at him, alive, terrified, but safe for the moment. Now Evan grabbed the man's wrist, yanking with all the force his legs could muster. Together with Rex's bracing, they hauled him onto the garage. The man collapsed, coughing, spitting water. His face was pale, his lips purple, but he was breathing. Stay down, don't move, Evan ordered. He turned to Maya. I'm coming up. He hauled himself onto the slick roof, muscles screaming with fatigue, rain pouring down like nails. Rex scrambled after him, claws finding impossible holds, hauling his weight as if he'd trained for roofs his entire life. The three of them, man, child, dog, huddled on a trembling island of shingles, the flood gnashing at their edges. The man coughed again. You saved us. Not yet, Evan said grimly. He looked at the hill, closer now but still across a raging channel. The garage shuddered beneath them, its frame moaning. It wouldn't last long. Maya whispered, Evan? Yeah? Stay with me. He pressed a wet palm against her back. Always. Lightning flashed. The hill waited. But first, they had to find a way off this dying roof. The garage roof was no sanctuary, it was a fuse, burning fast. Evan could feel it beneath his palms, the vibration of a structure that had given everything it had to give. Nails groaned, rafters shifted, the shingles under his boots rising and falling like a dying animal's chest. The flood wanted this roof, and soon it would have it. He adjusted his stance, keeping Maya tucked against his side while the rescued man lay sprawled near the ridge, coughing violently. His breath rattled, broken by shivers. Evan recognized the early signs of hypothermia, the slow claw of cold drawing blood inward. He knew minutes mattered. Hey, Evan called over the storm, pressing his hand against the man's shoulder. Stay with me. Name? Chris, the man rasped. His lips trembled, voice barely audible. All right, Chris. Focus on me. We're not done. We've got a hill right there. Evan pointed with his chin toward the dark rise beyond the water. Lightning illuminated it again, close enough now to make it look almost reachable. We move now, or this roof takes us down with it. Chris blinked, rain filling his lashes. I can't. Yes, you can, Evan said sharply, his tone the same one he'd used on broken men in desert medevac tents. You've got two choices, you walk with us, or I drag you. Either way, we don't stay. Rex gave a low bark, urgent, ears pivoting toward the flood. A deep, shifting rumble rose beneath them, woods snapping, walls breaking. Evan glanced back at the main house and saw water forcing its way through windows, glass exploding outward in sparkling shards. The garage's connection to the house twisted, buckling. Time was gone. Rex, perimeter. Evan barked. The shepherd bounded to the roof's edge, planting himself like a sentry, eyes fixed on the waterline. Evan pulled the rope coil from his pack, hands slick but steady. He anchored it around the chimney stub, nodding fast, then clipped one end to his harness. He looped another around Chris's torso, cinching it high on his chest. This line doesn't break, Evan said. Neither do we. Chris nodded faintly, too weak for words. Maya, Evan said gently, turning to her. Remember the game we played, counting steps? She nodded, teeth chattering. We're going to play again. But this time, it's with the hill. Every step we take, you count. Out loud. Deal? Her small voice trembled, but she said, deal. He pressed his forehead against hers for the briefest second. That's how I'll know we're winning. The garage roof cracked under them like a gunshot. Water surged through the seams. Evan didn't hesitate. "Move," he shouted, shoving forward into the black torrent as the roof began to collapse behind them. They hit the water hard. Cold closed over their waists, their chests, trying to yank everything down. Evan kicked, pulling Maya high against him, his other arm dragging Chris by the rope. Rex leapt cleanly, swimming with brutal precision, each stroke a defiance of gravity and flood alike. "Count, Maya!" Evan roared. "1," she gasped, voice swallowed by rain. Evan drove forward, muscles burning, lungs straining. The current lashed against them, shoving sideways toward the lower ground. He fought it, angling his body, using Rex as the point of their triangle. 2. Maya cried. Chris flailed, sputtering, his weight dead against the rope. Evan hauled him, every tendon screaming. "Kick, Chris! Anything you've got left." 3. Maya choked, water splashing over her head before Evan lifted her again. Lightning seared the sky, and in that white glare, Evan saw the hill, closer now, maybe 50 yards, but rising, promising ground that water couldn't touch. 4. The current slammed a refrigerator-sized log into their path, a jagged monster turning in the flood. Rex lunged, teeth snapping into Evan's sleeve, pulling him just enough to pivot. The log crashed past, missing them by inches. 5. "Good girl!" Evan shouted, hope threading through exhaustion. Chris coughed, spitting water. His eyes had a flicker of fight again. He began to kick weakly, helping instead of hindering. 6. Maya gasped, clutching Evan's neck. The current tried once more, opening like a mouth. Evan dug deep, remembering nights when desert winds had tried to strip skin from bone, remembering men he refused to leave behind. His body obeyed the memory. He drove them forward. 7. The hill's base rose ahead, dark soil and exposed roots swirling in eddies. Rex surged forward, paws finding purchase on the first mound of earth. He barked, triumphant, urging them on. 8. Evan's boots hit mud. He nearly collapsed from the shock of solidity after endless water, but he forced his legs to lock. He heaved Chris onto the slope, then lifted Maya high, planting her on a root above the surge. 9, she cried, voice sharp and bright now. 10. Evan bellowed with her, hauling himself up beside them. They collapsed together on the slope, coughing, shaking, but alive. Rain still hammered, thunder still split the sky, but the flood couldn't climb this high. Not yet. Chris lay panting, clutching the rope as if it was the only real thing left. Maya pressed her face against Rex's wet fur, whispering words too soft for Evan to hear, but he knew their meaning: gratitude, relief, the fragile seed of safety. Evan pushed himself up on trembling arms, scanning the darkness. They weren't finished. Not until he knew what, or who, else the storm had taken. Not until every whisper had an answer. The slope of the hill was no gentle refuge. Mud churned under every step, slick as oil, and the water clawed at their boots like it refused to let them leave. Evan hauled Chris higher with the rope, planting him against a cluster of roots that jutted like ribs out of the hillside. The man sagged there, chest heaving, water dripping off his soaked hair, but alive. Maya scrambled onto the next ledge of dirt and grass, Rex right behind her, the dog's claws digging deep, anchoring her climb. Evan stayed close, ready to grab her if the slope betrayed them. His muscles screamed, arms heavy, thighs quivering, but adrenaline was a furnace, and he stoked it with every thought of the girl's whisper, "Stay with me." They were 30 feet above the flood when Evan finally allowed himself to breathe deeper. The town below was almost unrecognizable now. Streets had become canals, roofs islands. Porch lights that had once dotted the cul-de-sacs were dark, drowned or ripped away. The delivery truck they'd used as cover was nearly gone, only its roof visible above the surge. And still, the rain came. Evan knew they couldn't stay on the hillside forever. If the water rose further, and storms like this had no mercy, it could eat the hill's base and shear the whole slope. He needed higher ground still. Lightning gave him glimpses of a plateau above, maybe another 50 feet up. Dense pine trees hunched there, their silhouettes bending in the gale. If they reached that line, they'd be safe from water, though the storm itself would still punish them. "Maya," he said, crouching beside her. Her face was pale, lips blue, but her eyes were steady. "We're not done yet. Can you climb a little more?" She nodded quickly, even though her small body trembled. "I can. Just don't let go." "Not in a million years," Evan said firmly. He pressed the carabiner on her strap to his own harness, a tether short enough that she'd never be more than an arm's length from him. Chris groaned behind them. "I can't make it." Evan turned, jaw tight. "Yes, you can. You've already made it this far." Chris shook his head, eyes glassy. "My legs, they won't hold." Evan stared at him, calculating. To carry both Maya and Chris up that slope while the mud gave way under every step, that was a recipe for failure. But to leave Chris here was no option either. The man's chest heaved in shudders, skin paling under the cold. "Rex," Evan said suddenly. The shepherd looked up, ears alert, tail rigid. "Anchor him." The dog patted down, planting himself beside Chris. Evan secured the other end of the rope to Rex's harness. "You lean on him," Evan told Chris, voice sharp. "He'll brace you. You just keep moving. Don't fight the mud, flow with it. Got it?" Chris blinked, stunned, then nodded faintly. He placed a shaking hand on Rex's harness. The shepherd didn't flinch, didn't shy. He became a living pillar, steadying every stagger as Chris forced himself to crawl upward. "Good," Evan muttered. "That's it. One movement at a time." They climbed. Mud slid under boots and nails. Evan's gloves filled with grit. Maya kept count, whispering numbers like a prayer, 1, 2, 3, each number steadied Evan more than she knew. Halfway up, the ground shook. At first Evan thought it was thunder rolling close, but then he saw it, a landslide. On the opposite side of the hill, where the soil had softened, a whole section gave way with a roar, trees toppling like matchsticks, roots tearing free with a scream. Earth and water mixed into a black torrent rushing back into the flood below. Maya cried out, clutching Evan's shoulder. Chris nearly slipped, saved only by Rex bracing hard into the slope. Evan's heart pounded, but his voice cut through the chaos. "Eyes on me, Maya. Keep counting." "F4, she stammered, tears mixing with rain. "That's it," Evan said. "Five's waiting up there." The plateau drew closer. Evan reached for exposed roots, hauling himself and Maya upward. Chris groaned, stumbling, but Rex growled low, dragging him back to balance. Finally, Evan's hand slammed onto flat earth. He heaved Maya up onto the plateau, then dragged Chris with a grunt. Rex leapt last, landing solid, shaking his soaked fur like a small storm of his own. They collapsed in the pines, all four of them, gasping, coughing, alive. The plateau was solid, high enough that the flood could not easily touch it. For the first time in hours, Evan felt the ground beneath him hold steady. Maya pressed against Rex, burying her face in his fur. The shepherd licked her cheek once, brief but grounding. She whispered into his ear, "Thank you." Chris rolled onto his back, eyes closed, chest heaving. "Thought I was gone." "You're not," Evan said firmly. "Not tonight." He pulled his radio again. Static. Dead. The world below was cut off. They were a small island now, for souls on a hill, the storm still raging overhead. Evan stood, scanning the horizon. Lightning cracked, outlining the valley. He saw rooftops floating, a propane fire still burning where the candlelight had been in 120, and far beyond, headlights, a convoy of emergency vehicles trying to reach the cut-off road. But it would be hours, maybe longer, before they reached survivors. "Stay awake," Evan told both of them. "Storm's not finished yet." The thunder rolled again. The night had more trials in store. And Maya, still clinging to him, whispered once more, "Stay with me." Evan nodded, rain streaking his face. "Always." The plateau gave them breath, but it did not give them peace. The pines bent and groaned like old men in the gale, their crowns snapping branches that fell like spears. Evan kept Maya pressed close to his side while scanning the tree line for hazards. Chris slumped against a trunk, teeth chattering, lips purple. Rex paced between them, tail stiff, ears swiveling, the dog a sentry that never asked for relief. Evan crouched low, pulling a thermal blanket from his rescue pack. He shook it open, the silver surface whipping in the wind, then wrapped it tightly around Maya and Chris. The material crinkled loudly but immediately trapped heat. "Stay under this as much as you can," he ordered. "You lose heat, you lose time. And time's all we've got left." Maya peeked out, eyes wide, hair plastered to her forehead. "Are we safe now?" Evan's answer was careful. "We're safer than down there. But the storm's not done." He angled his headlamp downslope, where the flood still churned, devouring fences, sheds, even parts of the hill's base. "See that? The water's still rising. We need higher ground before dawn." Chris groaned. "I can't move again." "Not yet." "You don't have a choice," Evan said, his voice flint. He softened only when Maya flinched at the tone. "We'll rest a few minutes. Then we climb again." The lightning tore the sky open. For a moment, the whole valley was daylight. Evan saw devastation painted in cruel clarity, cars pinned against trees, rooftops bobbing like rafts, flames licking from what had once been a hardware store. And bodies, he tried not to count them, but he saw them. People who hadn't been reached in time. He forced himself to look away, to focus on the living breathing warmth pressed against his side. Rex stiffened suddenly, nose lifting, body vibrating with alert. A bark ripped from his throat, sharp and warning. Evan spun, scanning the tree-line uphill. For a breath, he saw nothing. Then movement, two figures stumbling through the rain. "Help!" a woman's voice cried, raw and breaking. She carried something bundled in her arms. Behind her, a boy no older than 10 staggered, his small frame bent under a backpack twice his size. Evan surged forward, waving his arm. "Here! Over here!" They nearly collapsed into him. The woman's bundle shifted, and Evan saw a baby's face, pale and crying weakly. "My house, gone, water everywhere," the woman gasped. Her knees buckled. Evan caught her, steadying her against the mud. "Sit, breathe," he said. "You made it. You're alive. That's all that matters right now." The boy dropped his pack with a thud, tears cutting lines through the grime on his cheeks. "I couldn't carry her anymore," he whispered, pointing at the baby. "Mom said." "You did perfect," Evan cut in. "You brought your family this far. That's more than most could have done." He glanced back at Chris, still huddled under the blanket. Numbers. They were becoming a group, not just a pair. And groups were harder to move, harder to keep safe. Maya peeked out from under her corner of the blanket. Her eyes lit faintly when she saw the baby, but she said nothing, clutching Rex tighter. The shepherd allowed it, lowering his head to her lap as if grounding her. Evan scanned the plateau, thinking. The hilltop above was still the goal, but climbing with a baby and an exhausted boy would be a nightmare. He weighed options, build a shelter here, wait for rescue, but the storm showed no sign of relenting. And if the base washed further, even this plateau might not hold. He checked the baby, fingers against her skin. Cold but responsive. She let out a weak cry when he pulled his hand away. Needs warmth, he muttered. He pulled another thermal from his pack, wrapping the infant tight before handing her back to the mother. Lightning flashed again, and Evan caught sight of something farther upslope, a faint red glow through the trees. Not lightning, not fire. A flare. His chest tightened. That meant other responders. A chance at extraction. There, he said, pointing. See that light? We're heading that way. The mother nodded weakly, eyes hollow with exhaustion but shining with hope. Evan gathered them all together. Listen. This next climb is tough. The mud will fight us. But we've got each other, and we've got Rex. Follow him. If you fall, shout. Nobody gets left behind. Chris muttered, You're insane. Maybe, Evan said. But I'm not wrong. They moved. Evan led with Maya clipped to him, Rex breaking trail with low growls at shifting shadows. The mother carried the baby close to her chest, her son beside her, struggling but determined. Chris leaned on the shepherd when his legs faltered, swearing under his breath but refusing to stop. Step by step, they climbed. The flare's glow grew brighter, pulsing through the storm like a heartbeat. For the first time that night, Evan felt the edge of hope sharpen against his exhaustion. Halfway up, Maya's voice rose again, fragile but steady. Stay with me. Evan's throat tightened. Always. The group pressed higher, toward that fragile red promise cutting through the dark. The climb felt endless, a cruel loop where each step forward was stolen back by the storm. Mud sucked at boots, roots snapped under weight, and the rain stung like gravel hurled from the sky. But the flare's glow pulsed ahead, stubborn against the dark, and Evan used it the way soldiers use stars, something fixed to guide men through chaos. Maya clung against his chest, whispering numbers again, her own rhythm to the climb. 11, 12, 13, each word was shaky, but each one landed like a drumbeat, marking time, measuring courage. Evan fed on it, matching her breath to his, because in storms like this you don't climb alone, you climb as a chorus. Behind him, the mother stumbled, clutching the baby so tightly that her arms shook. The infant cried, a thin sound swallowed by rain but still insistent. The boy trudged beside her, hands raw from clawing at roots, lips bitten to keep from crying out. Chris dragged himself upward with Rex braced against his hip, the shepherd adjusting every step to take his weight. The rope creaked but held, a lifeline of muscle and steel. Lightning split the sky again, white fire pouring across the valley. Evan looked back once and almost wished he hadn't. The town below was gone. The cul-de-sac, the truck, the garage roof, they were nothing now but swirling debris, swallowed whole. The flood had written over everything they'd fought for in the last hour. He tightened his grip on Maya. Not her, he promised. Not any of them. Almost there, he called, voice carrying in the way he'd learned to project on battlefields and training fields alike. Keep your eyes on that light. But the storm wasn't ready to let them go. A sound rose above the rain, deep and grinding, like stone dragged across stone. Evan's head snapped up. Above, a massive pine shuddered. Its roots, loosened by days of water and minutes of violence, tore free with a sickening crack. The trunk leaned, groaning, then fell. Down. Evan bellowed. The tree came crashing, a titan collapsing into the slope. Branches exploded, roots ripped earth into the air. Evan threw his body sideways, shielding Maya as the trunk smashed against the hillside just feet from them. Mud geysered, branches lashed. The mother screamed, curling around her baby. Chris slipped, tumbling a few feet before Rex yanked the rope taut, muscles straining, claws gouging into mud. When the roar subsided, Evan blinked against the rain. The tree had carved a scar across the slope, splitting their path. The flare's glow still burned above, but now a wall of trunk and branches blocked their climb. "We can't go through," Chris gasped, panic in his voice. "We're trapped." Evan's jaw set. "No. We go around." He pointed to the left, where the slope curved sharper but remained passable. "It'll be steeper, but it'll hold." He adjusted Maya, who was trembling but awake, eyes wide as saucers. "Stay with me," she whispered again, the phrase frayed with fear. "Always," Evan said, pressing his chin briefly to her wet hair. They angled left, hugging the hillside. The slope tilted precariously, water sluicing down in rivulets. Evan went first, carving a path with boots and hands, hauling himself up by roots and rocks slick as glass. He reached back often, pulling the boy, steadying the mother, hauling Chris when his legs buckled. Rex never left his side, the shepherd's breath hot, constant, his eyes twin flames in the storm. Every 10 feet, Evan checked the flare. Closer now, brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. He imagined men up there, responders like himself, scanning the valley, waiting to pull survivors into their circle of light. He needed that circle. For Maya. For all of them. The last 50 feet were hell. The slope steepened into near vertical mud. Evan jammed his boots into the hillside, carving ledges. He hauled Maya onto his back, clipped her short tether so she couldn't slip. He lashed Chris and the boy to the rope, guiding them hand over hand while Rex scrambled above, anchoring with every muscle in his frame. The mother struggled last, clutching her baby, eyes wild. Evan reached down, shouting over the storm, "Give me the child. Trust me." She hesitated, terror ripping her in two. Then, with a cry, she lifted the infant up. Evan grabbed her, cradling her under his chin, tucking her against his chest beside Maya. His arms burned, but he climbed anyway, dragging life with him, refusing to yield. At last, his hand closed around the root of a pine near the ridge. He pulled, legs screaming, and suddenly he was there, flat ground, the flare blazing red just 20 yards ahead. He collapsed to his knees, laying the baby gently in the mother's arms as she clawed up after him. Maya slid off his back, clinging to Rex, her breath ragged but alive. Chris and the boy sprawled beside them, mud-caked, trembling. And then voices. Real voices, cutting through the rain. Survivors. "Over here!" Figures in ponchos and helmets ran toward them, floodlights spearing the dark. Radios crackled, hands reached, blankets opened. Evan felt a weight lift from his chest, heavier than any flood. Maya looked up at him, eyes reflecting firelight and storm. "You stayed," she whispered. He managed a tired smile. "Always." But even as rescuers pulled them into the circle of light, Evan's eyes drifted downslope. The storm still raged, the valley still drowned. And somewhere out there, more voices might still be whispering, waiting for someone to hear. The red flare hissed above them, bleeding light into the storm like a wound that refused to close. It was salvation, yes, but it was also the final test. Evan knew from experience that rescue wasn't the end of a battle. The body could betray itself in those last steps, adrenaline draining, muscles buckling once hope seemed secure. He couldn't let that happen. Not for Maya, not for the mother with her infant, not for Chris, not for anyone. Stay together. Evan barked, voice cutting through the storm like a blade. He rose to his feet, planting himself between the group and the chaos below. "We're not finished until we're under that light." The rescuers were already moving toward them, silhouettes with helmets gleaming, ponchos snapping in the wind. One carried a megaphone, but his voice was barely needed. Evan's group had already seen the light, already felt the gravity pulling them upward. The rescuers set lines, hammered stakes, building an anchor point at the hilltop. It was the difference between panic and precision. Evan unclipped Maya's tether from his harness, crouched in front of her, and pressed his hands to her shoulders. Her hair clung to her face, eyes wide and trembling, but still she held herself upright, still she whispered, "Stay with me." "Always," Evan said, and kissed her forehead. "But listen now, you walk to those lights. Step for step. Don't run. Don't look back. Rex will be at your side. You're not alone." She nodded, small and fierce, and wrapped her arms around Rex's neck. The shepherd stood like a pillar, letting her lean, guiding her forward. The sight etched itself into Evan's chest, a child and a dog walking into salvation together. Chris stumbled, nearly collapsing, but two rescuers grabbed him, slinging his arms over their shoulders. His eyes rolled back, but his feet moved, dragged toward safety. The mother clutched her infant so tightly it was hard to tell where her arms ended and the blanket began. The boy, mud-caked, exhausted, staggered beside her, one rescuer steadying him with a firm hand. Evan was the last to move. He turned once more toward the valley, the drowned streets, the broken roofs. The flood was still rising, swallowing whole lives in silence. He thought of the voices still out there, the ones that hadn't reached him, the whispers that might never be answered. His chest tightened. A hand clapped his shoulder. One of the rescuers, face half hidden under a helmet. "You coming, soldier?" Evan nodded, voice rough. "Yeah. Just making sure the flood knows it didn't win." He walked forward, boots sinking into the mud, until he stepped under the circle of floodlights. The world shifted instantly, harsh white beams against the storm, blankets shoved around shoulders, hot packs pressed into hands, radios chattering with coded urgency. For the first time that night, Evan felt the storm's weight ease, not gone, but shared. Maya broke free from Rex long enough to run to him, arms flung around his waist. "You stayed," she said again, muffled against his chest. He hugged her back, voice steady. "Always." The rescuers gathered the group, moving them toward temporary shelters erected in the pines, canvas tents with heaters humming, dry clothes piled in plastic bins. The baby's cry grew stronger as warmth touched her skin, a sound that felt like defiance. Chris collapsed onto a cot, rescuers working quickly to wrap him, rub circulation into his limbs, slip oxygen over his face. The boy sat silent, clutching a steaming mug of broth, eyes fixed on nothing, until Maya sat beside him and leaned her head against his shoulder. Then, slowly, he leaned back. Evan crouched beside Rex, running a hand through the shepherd's soaked fur. "You did good, boy. Carried us all tonight." Rex licked his hand once, eyes tired but steady. The dog didn't need praise. He only needed presence. When Evan finally allowed himself to sit, he pulled off his gloves. His hands shook, not with fear, but with release. Every muscle screamed, every bone ached. Yet his mind replayed only one thing, that whisper, fragile and desperate, threading through thunder. "Stay with me." And he had. Hours later, when the rain finally began to thin, the sky a bruised gray instead of black, Evan stood at the edge of the plateau. He looked down at the valley, at what the flood had claimed. It was ruin, yes, but scattered in that ruin were sparks, other flares rising, other lights answering the dark. He wasn't the only one. He never had been. Maya came to his side, wrapped in a blanket too big for her, Rex pressed against her legs. She slipped her small hand into his. "Do we go home now?" Evan stared at the valley, then down at her. "We'll find home again," he said softly. "It may not look the same, but it'll be ours." She nodded, resting her head against his arm. The sun tried to break through the clouds, weak but insistent. It painted the flood with pale gold, turning wreckage into something almost holy. For a moment, silence stretched, not the silence of fear, but of survival. Evan drew a breath deep enough to taste the new day. "We stayed," he whispered. Rex gave a quiet woof, Maya squeezed his hand, and for the first time since the storm began, Evan believed it.